Hey, Ren. Hey, Mr. Ferguson. I usually being from the
Please,
South.
Ren.
Ren,
My dad's passed already, and he was Mr. Ferguson.
Ren, it is. Being a big Star Wars fan, I kind of want to make the Kylo Ren connection, but I'm sure you've heard that joke 1,000 times.
Ren and Stiffany leads the list.
Oh, okay. Well, wow. Well, I mean, welcome to the show. My name is Jason. This is Ren. He owns a guitar company with his family called Ren Ferguson Guitars. They do acoustic builds. Maybe I can convince them to do an electric build for me. Maybe.
That's kind of where it all started, so it'll come back to that sooner or later.
Well, let's start there. Let's start so what got you into building guitars?
Girls.
Oh, okay. That'll do it.
Yeah.
That'll do
Yeah, I
it.
thought I could be a football player and impress somebody, and after spending the season of being a tackling dummy, I figured, gosh, everybody likes guitar players. Maybe I should try that. It's not so self-abusing. And I started playing, with my brother in folk groups, and was so interested, got a job in a local music store and learned how to do repairs there, and just branched out doing my own repairs and learned taught myself to build.
So when you were doing repairs, what would be the most common type of repair that you would do?
Okay, well, it wasn't always on stringed instrument. Well, that's not true. It wasn't on guitars. The music store that I started with had a smattering of guitars, but they had a lot of rental instruments for bands and orchestras. And so initially I started replacing springs on wind instruments and, bending the armatures back, repadding and making the instruments play, recorking, just doing all the general maintenance to the school instruments that would come in for a touch-up between classes usually. Kids are pretty tough on instruments, even when they try not to. And none of them were total, but they always seem to have something that needed to be freshened up before we could put it back out. And then I started working on violin, and I honestly don't remember if we had any violas at that point, but we had a bunch of violins, and there were guitars there, and I was a guitar player, so I started working behind the counter, selling stuff to my friends, and got to know the district salesman that would come around. This was in Southern California, right at LAX, and I convinced the owner to stock the store with better quality instruments, and we did. And we went from having a handful up to, at one point, about 180 pieces on the wall.
Oh, wow.
And we were selling guitars like crazy. But that was the early 60s. And if it had 4 strings, you could sell it. It didn't matter. Everybody wanted to play, so business was booming. And I would kind of in the middle of that, and I would take in instruments that needed repair, generally from instruments that were accidentally damaged by the airlines. And we were right there, so they would send them over to get a quote on the instrument that was damaged. And of course, in 1964, 65, those instruments were pretty much vintage stuff. What we would call vintage now, they were just old guitars back then. And so taking them apart, putting them back together, whether it was a broadcaster or a 0028, they all came through there at one point. And I just started buying them from the people when they were too badly damaged that they couldn't be effectively repaired by the store. They didn't have spray facility. My dad had a furniture store, so I had a way to, redo finish and stuff. And so I just taught myself how to build by looking at old ones that were damaged and had to be repaired.
That's pretty cool. Because normally I know it's just it seems like you have a similar story to like a couple of other luthiers, but rather than just guitars, you went the whole way back, like all band and orchestra. So for me, that's pretty cool.
Well, it didn't last for a real long time. I tried to get a job with the LA school district. They needed somebody to do violin repair, mostly string instrument. And the test that I had to take was rehearing the bow. And because I did it so well and so accurately, they figured that I had done something to cheat and passed me over. I did it backwards. The way I had learned was backwards from everybody else, and it worked fine. And but they were not impressed with this kid. And luckily, I didn't get that gig. You know, it paid good and all, but it was, you know, down in downtown LA, and I would have had to commute or move. And heck, I was living at home with mom and dad, and I had Vietnam to look forward to, so I didn't want to get too involved, you know. I had a friend who was a wind instrument important guy that wanted me to get a job down there. He thought that would be a good long-term career for me, and set that all up, but it didn't go anywhere.
Oh, well, I mean, well, in the theory of multiverses now, that could have been a choice where you went somewhere else and, you know, whole different story or maybe the same. So that's where you started. Going from that, like, because I looked up a bit of your history. I know the biggest the big company is Gibson. What was the time in between that to Gibson? And then let's jump into Gibson.
Okay. I worked at that store until I think about 63, early 64, after school and on weekends until maybe early 67. And I was selling a lot of dobro guitars. I'd drive up to the Strip and hawk them to all the bands up, you know, at the Roxy or, you know, wherever they were. I would take instruments up there every weekend and hustle them. And some of them were store instruments and some of them were mine. But I was selling more dobro at the time than anybody else in the state. I mean, we were moving a lot. And just by the proximity to all of the West Coast artists, we were all coming through there every weekend. So, you know, here was something new and different, and people were playing ocarinas and they were just doing everything they could, you know, to find a different sound. And so that was a pretty different sound. But one of the things that I didn't understand at the time, and the people at Original Musical Instruments, which was what dobro was called at that time, was that I would set up every instrument that came in the door. I didn't care if it was a Mustang from Fender or, you know, an F-30 from Guild or whatever. I went over the whole thing and I made it play perfect and or as well as I could. And so these instruments worked, and when people played them, they tried them. Well, when the salesman had sold them to somebody, say, out in San Bernardino or in Tucson, Arizona, they just put them on the wall, and they baked and fried, and by the time somebody was interested in playing them, they didn't play very well. So there was no sell-through occurring except at my store. They offered me a position as the district salesman and travel the West Coast and hustle their guitars, which I took that job and did it for about a year. And I couldn't sell them to the stores because they already had them. They had already bought a bunch of them. I was doing inlay work for them and doing some engraving at the time on the side. And they thought it would be a kind gesture to offer to let me work in the plant. And so I moved into the factory just about the time Uncle Sam invited me to go to Southeast Asia.
No.
And I wouldn't get out of that. So my academics were no help at all. So I just was destined to have a different career for a while. And I moved into the factory and started talking to these guys that worked in there, and they were all, you know, middle-aged or older. And the original people that started dobro, Emil and John and their sister and Rudy, they were all in and out all the time. But the son owned the company OMI at that point. They were just cutscenes. But they had so much history and innovation in their family that I was a treat. And then all these other guys that worked in there, they were guitar players or builders. They were parts makers. And, you know, they also, most of those guys had second jobs where they were building furniture in downtime for the dobro factory. When we ran out of orders, we would build wooden toys. I mean, they do it in the factory. And one of the products that they made were these dobro instruments. And so I would, have to fret 100 boards, and I'd have to glue up a bunch of necks or machine a bunch of necks and then hand finish them and stuff. So I had a lot of experience up until the time I went active, and I had run down and joined the Naval Reserve because I was really sure I didn't want to get shot. And I was even more sure I didn't want to shoot anybody else. I mean, they were already mad at us. I didn't want to further that,
Yeah.
So I got into the Navy and was fortunate enough to go to an A school, which happened to be for electricians. And when I came out of that, I was sent to a repair ship stationed in Japan that would travel down to Vietnam and repair motors and generators and stuff on either on-land vehicles or other ships. And this was a floating city of people that were experts in their field, whether they were machinists or foundrymen or they had big brown eyeglasses on board. I mean, they did everything. They just, it's just an amazing place to be. And so I had a couple of years of some real good training on how to make stuff. And came back after the tour was over and came back to the States and went to work for Westward Music. And on Westward Boulevard in Westwood, California, kind of east of Santa Monica. And Fred Wallachy is the fellow that hired me. Really a friend of this day. I mean, we're still in touch and talk all the time. Great man. He had Chris Martin working for him for a while in the man before he moved into leadership in the company.
Like the Chris Martin from Martin.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so there's a lot of history went through there. They used to be next to a place called Leadbetter, an old folk destination back in the 50s and early 70s. That was pretty cool. And while working for him as a salesman, there was an incredibly talented repairman that worked for him who had been he was a musician, but he had also the guy that was hired to take care of all the instruments on ocean liners that, before the Second World War, and even after for a while, everybody traveled the world on ship. And they all had an orchestra or a band on board, and this was the guy that took care of all the instruments, and he worked in there, an old guy named Henry from Czechoslovakia. And he could just about build anything with a Hershey bar and a brick. The guy was great, and he was happy to show me everything that he could, and I sponged off him as long as I could. And I was doing some other work on the side for myself, and McCabe's guitar shop out there told me that they would support me with major repair work if I would open a studio by myself. And so I and a friend, Rob Ehlers, opened up a kind of a garage type shop, and we started doing repairs for McCabe's and Fred and other places. And at that time, I bought half of the K guitar inventory from C. Bruno and Son, which constituted bales and bales of fret wire and bending apparatus for guitars, and partially built ukuleles, partially built tops and backs of guitars. Paid for all that. We put kits together and sold them and reduced the cost of all that. Now I still have materials left over from that, I believe that. And K had already kind of disappeared. This was just what was left after the company had folded. They had bought all the inventory. And as an unknown event to me, at the same time that I put in my bid to buy it, somebody else in Northern California did. And as a crazy turn of events, I didn't know that fellow. I never met him. So he was hired as the general manager for the Montana factory that I started for Gibson up here. And found out that he was the one that bought the other stuff, and he sold and made, we just split the stuff down the middle, and he sold zither kits and guitar parts and stuff until he got all his money back. Did that. I went through three different buildings and had a school where I had a bunch of apprentices for a few years, and then eventually lost my mind in California and relocated to Colorado for a couple of years, and moved eventually to Montana. And while that interim period, I started building guns, primarily muzzleloader guns, replicas of historic pieces. And while I moved to Montana, I moved up here to be a trapper, and did that for about a year and a half until I realized that, tried to do it, I should say, until I realized that all the ranches were real old families, and they all had grandkids that they hoped would take care of the trapping problem, so I couldn't get on any ranches. And I ended up just being that first getter and trading work for pelts and stuff, and that was a lot more lucrative than driving all over the country trying to gather some fur. Just about the time that ebbed, Shiloh Sharps moved from Farmington, New York, I believe, to Big Timber, Montana, where I was living, and set up a new factory building Sharps rifles. And I was given the opportunity to be the first gun stocker for them in their first year, and did 1,000 pieces for them. And one night at dinner, I was at home of my pastor, got a phone call, and it was a fellow named Steve Carlson, who owned a company called Flatiron Mandolin. And he lived over here in Bozeman, close to where we live now, and said he found out who I was and wanted to offer me a job. And I said, God, man, I'm really flattered, but, I work 40 hours a week for Sharps. I've got my own gun shop that I try and do, Friday and Saturday, and then I travel with the church band. So, hey, I don't know how I could even find time to work for anybody else. He said, oh, well, I was going to pay $1,800 a month. I said, I'll see you in the morning. That was big money in Montana.
Yeah.
In fact, it still is, I think. So I came over and went to work for Steve and tooled up the mandolin factory, where we were building a lot of hardtop instruments a week, from doing, I think, about 6 a month when we started to doing about a dozen a week. And Henry Juskowitz had just purchased Gibson, and we didn't know that he was the owner. And it was time for the NAMM show, and Steve took one of our instruments, because we were producing more than we had the capacity to sell, went up to Henry and said, we make the best mandolins in the country, and you don't, and we'd like to be an OEM supplier. And Henry said, I'll just sue you and put you out of business. And he sort of did. We started building banjos at that point, and did that for about a year, and eventually the business was negotiated, and Gibson bought Flatiron. And about a year later, after doing a lot of the work for Nashville up here with card top blocks and inlay packages, packet bindings, purfling pick guards, and a lot of hand work, Henry decided to build a new factory to build acoustic guitars, because having the correct insight in 1986 when he bought it, or 87, I'm not sure now what year it was, but about that time, acoustics were just beginning to crawl out of the buildings, and heavy metal was just coming in, and electric guitars were the guitar of the future. So he took everything in the Nashville plant and got it off the floor, put it in semi-trailers out in the backyard, and cleared the floor so he could make Les Paul, because that was the cash cow for Gibson, was building Les Paul. But by the time his quality improved what had been being done, or the factory was building better stuff, there was great demand for Gibson. Everybody also wanted J45s and Hummingbirds and J200s and Doves, and he had no place to do that. He tried unsuccessfully to buy Guild at one point, and didn't get that together, so he decided, after finding out what I knew and where I had been in my history, that we would build a factory here in Montana, and I would do all the training and design the tools and build all the fixtures, and we'd build guitars in Montana. That worked out pretty well, especially for Gibson.
Oh, yeah. So how long were you at Gibson in total? Because I've seen the artist roster that you got on your website, and I'm like, holy crap, you've worked with some legends.
Well, in a lot of cases, that's smoke and mirrors. I mean, I did build the guitars, but in a lot of cases, I didn't get to interact with the actual individual that was going to get that guitar. It was a guitar that was ordered, or they wanted to promote a guitar, so they would cut a deal with Paul McCartney to have us build a replica of a particular Epiphone, the AT Texan. And so we built those, and I built the prototype for him, and he's the one that signed off on it. But I did build it for him, but I didn't have that interaction any more than I did with Johnny Depp when I did that crazy guitar for the Pirate.
I saw that. Like, it's funny, as a fan of that movie, I did not know that was your guitar.
Well, the guitar in the movie's not mine. The one that we made for him after the first movie was done, I took down to the sets at Disney and got to tour while they were filming 2 and 3, and left the guitar for him. And they presented it to him. It was a gift from Disney to him. And I was going to build that guitar whether he got it or not. At the time, my son Matthew was working in an artist relations for Gibson, and he'd been there for about 10 years. And he was playing in a pickup band with the producers of the movie. So he knew them all really well. And he said, hey, my dad, grew up at Disneyland, and that's where he went on dates. And, that was a favorite ride of everybody, with Pirates of the Caribbean. And so when that movie came out, my dad lives in the mountains. He doesn't know who anybody is or anything. And he went to see it just because he was going to be so skeptical it wouldn't be right. And he said he fell in love with the movie. It was just over the top for him, and he had to build a guitar to do it. And there's a scene in there where Captain Jack Sparrow is on the island. He's been marooned for the second time with the girl, and he flocks on the beach, and he explains to her that a ship is more than a hull and a deck and sails and a rudder, that it's actually freedom. And I thought, that's a guitar. And so I bought the video when it came out, and I started, I click, stop, or pause, and I do sketches of different elements of it so I could work it into the theme of the guitar. And I was building it when he told him, and they said, well, you can't do that. Gibson and Disney won't allow it. And my son said, well, why don't you just buy it and give it to Johnny? And they went, that's a great idea. So they sent me all the props from the thing and invited me down to go through the ship and look at all this stuff. They gave me the coins and a lot of still photography that they taken. And that was really a fun project to do while at Gibson.
Oh, wow. That's pretty awesome. So, I guess we're going forward. So what made you decide to step out on your own? And I have a follow-up question to that.
Okay. The reason that I left Gibson was it was a real tough choice. But the owner, Henry, had given me an opportunity to build what we call master museum pieces, which Johnny was one of, as a way of increasing my income without having to be through the books. I started a business, and I was allowed to bring those guitar parts home and build them here, take them back again, and finish them off as Gibson guitars and offer for sale. And I would get a percentage of that money, and the company got a percentage of it, which was fine with me because I love to work. And that went along fine for many years. And wages in Montana are historically low, always have been. That's why we put the factory here in the beginning. And as it was his nature, Henry's, he would hire these incredibly gifted individuals in the business world that had proven themselves in some other capacity other than guitars. And I mean, we are a different breed of cats.
Oh yeah.
This is all that matters to us, But that's not necessarily the way it is with somebody that's hired to manage finance, because that's what they do. And there was a decision made at one point to, as we were evolving, to no longer offer custom instrument, which effectively cut my wages in half. And I waited for that to come back around for about 5 years. And it didn't look like it was going to, because people that worked for Henry would make these policy changes for the corporation, maybe the right decision, but it affected individuals at times adversely. And I was one of those. And I couldn't get to Henry to renegotiate that agreement that he offered back in '93. And so it was a period of kind of waiting to see if it would happen. And I did a lot of travel at that time, so I was out of the country a lot, around the world for Gibson, teaching about guitar building and lecturing and selling and stuff. Came home after a trip from Japan after my then current general manager and I had been in Japan for about 10 days. And my general manager was going through a real hard time with the corporation at that time. And he played a lot about this situation and kept saying, I wonder why anybody would stay here, why would, we work under these adverse conditions. And, man, I'd been hearing that for 27 years, I didn't know any better. But I came home and a week later I had an injury to my right leg and on a hunting trip. And I wasn't going to be able to work for a while, and I was going to be 66 the following in February. This was in the end of November. And I thought, this just isn't going to get better. I might as well just retire. I'll just go home and build a guitar when I want to, or a banjo, mandolin, whatever it is, I'll just do what I want to do. And I go paint, love to paint. I just do some of the things I want to do. So I resigned. By this time, for a couple of years, my son had left Gibson, and now it's head of artist relations at Fender. And Larry Thomas, who had owned Guitar Center, was the CEO at that time. And my son mentioned to him that I was going to leave, finally going to retire. And Larry said, well, gosh, call him, see if he wants to work for Fender. My son said, you call him if you want to talk to him. Larry called me, asked me if I'd be interested in working for him. And I said, well, I'm all banged up. I got about 3 months in a walking cast. And he said, that's okay. We'll wait. I'd love you to come on board. And so I went through the interview process. Even though I had been already hired, I went through that. And ended up going back and trying to recover kind of the problems they had with Gil as their chief acoustic technician. Something just popped up on the screen here.
No, that was me.
What it said. All right, we're back.
Mm-hmm.
Gil kind of couldn't be repaired. It had nothing to do with the quality of the guitar. There were some constraints in New Hartford, Connecticut, where the factory was. This beautiful old historic building. I think it started out as a water-powered manufacturing site for Singer sewing machine. It really had this incredible history, but it occupied 2 different buildings on 5 different floors. And people were either riding elevators or walking around carrying stuff. And the constraint was not so much the building, but the city ordinances or the state ordinance or whatever it was that would not allow us to paint more than, I think it was 10 instruments a day maximum. Well, with the crew that we had, that couldn't pay the bill. And that's why it was in such bad shape. And I recommended to Larry that they move, anywhere else and make a factory that was maybe like a train where you start at one end and the guitar comes out the other instead of all this zigzagging back and forth. We did a study where we had people with pedometers following the group around as they worked. And they were doing something like 17 miles a day walking, just carrying product. I'm not the same guy carrying the same part around, but I mean, it was that inefficient. And at any rate, about a year and a half or year and 3/4 into my tenure with Fender and Guild, the company decided to go public and sell stock. And somehow the stock was undervalued for what they felt it would needed to be. And they had a lot of bills to pay, I guess. Very similar to what happened to Henry Jutzkowitz with Gibson. A bunch of venture capitalists came in and just took it over. And they decided, like they always do, to cut the fat or cut the costs in any way they can. And Guild would lose the money historically. And so it was one of the first things to go. And Larry decided that they would let Guild go. He sold it to his son and his partner that had Cordova Guitars out in California. And they offered me a position to come and start a factory in California, which I tried to explain to them would have the same problems that we had with finishing as Connecticut had. At any rate, we ended up moving everything out of California and then started a factory there. And I was with them for a couple of years, and then came back to Montana. Helped a friend in China with a factory for a couple of years, off and on, and then moved back into kind of a semi, I never really retired, but wasn't working for someone for a while. You know, I do a little job here and there and stuff. My son, Timothy, I've got two sons, Matthew, who is now with Yamaha, artist relation, and my youngest daughter, Virginia. We decided that we would build guitars here because I had, in my lifetime, have acquired incredible pad show precious lumber. You know, the best stuff I could find, thinking any day I'd get fired at Gibson, which gave me great license to improve the product back to what I thought were the important features. And thankfully, that DNA is still in the factory today, different ownership, but the guitars are coming out a good instrument.
That's good to hear, because that's actually a question I was going to ask your opinion on their guitars being made now, but you answered it already. So,
well, it's kind of funny. Because I went to work for Fender, I suppose, I am persona non grata there. They don't let me in the door. They don't. I have nothing to do with them other than seeing the guitars at the local guitar store, and they're very nice. They're really good. I did sneak in with the group and take a tour last summer. Everybody chagrin, I believe, but it was not being some of my old employees.
That's what's up, though. That's pretty cool. So now we're at Ren Ferguson Guitars, and I know starting a new guitar company is probably daunting, especially in this day and age. But one of the things that I looked at on your guitars is they seem more like art pieces, like true artistry. So I guess my question would be was that an intentional way for you to separate yourself from everybody else like Gibson or Fender and make it more your own? So, because I mean, I see you flanked by these beautiful guitars.
Thank you very much. I started to say my son Timothy began building Ukes back in the 90s, I think, and had been around it his whole life, so it wasn't anything new to him. And back then, there wasn't anybody really building Ukes other than a few handful of guys, and a lot of offshore companies build it, thousands at a time. And he just naturally took to inlay and has excelled. I hired him as a subcontractor to do most of the inlay, the volume pieces, when we would say we could do a custom run with, this vine on it. My son Tim did all the inlay work, and then he'd bring the boards in, we'd slot them, and bind them up, fret them, and put them on guitars. And because I didn't trust Gibson to pull the rug up any moment under him or I or anybody else, I felt that he should do it privately. So he became a very, very competent inlay artist, and he's a great craftsman and a good builder. And so I had hired him to come out and work with me at Gill to build fixture pillows because he's a welder and he can fabricate all kinds of stuff. And, we were building all of the tools that we were going to use out there. And then he stayed in California for a while and then moved up to Idaho for a little bit. And I tricked him into moving back here and starting Ren Ferguson Company with me, which I actually started back in 71, but, it's kind of come and gone over the years back and forth. When I first moved to Montana, I was, like I said, I was doing the trapping thing and building guns, and I wasn't building instruments, and I wasn't playing for many years. And I had planned to tell my wife that I just forgot. And so it kind of, the whole thing with Flatiron kind of let it out of the bag, and go back and revisit some of that stuff. Why I left California and all. But the art end of it is, while we were in Big Timber, being in Montana, you have to have 3 or 4 jobs always, And one of the jobs that we had, in addition to my trapping and building the guns and being in the band at one point, was we built replica props for Western artists. And we would put on rendezvous for the Northwest Rendezvous Group, for instance, which was all the people that were painting contemporary artists painting historic pieces. And my bane of my existence is making sure that if you do something, you try and do it right. And if that color of bead was not available in 1840, then don't paint it in your painting. Paint the right color. I'll show you what the right color is. I'll make you a sample. And whether it was a saddle or a gun or a bow, a quiver, a dance bustle or a shirt, leggings, whatever, we made that. We tanned our hides. We did everything ourselves. My wife and I catered to Western artists for a long time. But I've always been that way. I've always wanted to do more than would get me by. I want this stuff to be, Kim coined the term functional art. And I don't just build a muzzle loader. I build a copy of a famous Pennsylvania rifle with all the carving, all the gold and silver inlay and engraving, make as many of the parts as I can myself. All that is kind of who I am. I have to do it. I have to paint. I don't sell paintings. I don't even give them away, but I have to do it, And I just see more in the instrument, the canvas, than just making a guitar that sounds great. Now, the first thing that's got to happen is it's got to be a great guitar. And you can't make a great guitar unless you start with wood that's got music in. So all this stuff that I've collected over my life is all sonic kind of tested and agreed upon that this would be a useful piece of wood to use. There's still a break-in period. Guitars don't start out perfect. All the glue joints and the energy being driven through them by the strings still has to break down, and all those parts have to kind of learn, work together in the same way. Even if you took 100-piece orchestra of professionals, they still have to get together and play the same song and understand that when the conductor does that, that's where their cue is, that they don't overshadow any other part, that they work in harmony and balance. And so a lot of times I'll do things that I want to do. All that I've learned in my life is how to combine that stuff so we get instruments that are nice, they're attractive, they play good, they sound wonderful, they look amazing because of the selection of material. But then I get to play on it, and I can do artwork, and a lot of people want interested. We've just launched a series this last year of a fly fishing theme group of instruments, and they have all the inlay on the fretboard are the dry flies and wet flies that are rental used here on the Gallatin River where we live.
My friend Curtis Novak, wonderful pickup maker, but he was the one who turned me on to the artistry of things because he views it as art. So like while prepping for this and looking at your guitars, I was just like, wow, this is like truly like art. Like, I mean, and then hearing about your background with everything, like it now makes sense. So I guess the follow that up, like, can people go and purchase your guitars, like, or is it all custom built?
We have about a year's worth of back orders of people who have ordered guitars. And I would say they're all custom because every one is individual.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it could be an early parlor guitar, it could be a version of a Gibson historic build. Well, it could be anything. You know, whatever somebody wants, we can do, and we will do. But it also might be that they want a traditional dreadnought with a theme of Canadian wildlife on it. You know, it's nothing special on the guitar body. It's out of what we consider our precious wood, and then their desire to ornament it the way they are. If we're just doing a guitar, this is sort of an early Martin variety, probably from the 1920, 30. Not that it would be recognized as the Martin, but that was the idea that I started with. You know, that's what I learned building back in the 60s. Or if it's a Gibson style, it's not the guitar that I built for Gibson when I was there. It's a variation on that theme. There are people that want to have exact copies of a particular model or period, and we did that one time for one cell, and we're going to do it again. You know, that's for no other reason than I have no interest on trying to upscale Gibson. I love Gibson. I love Mark. You know, I mean, all the old instruments are what brought me to today. And when I built my first instrument, it was for my brother. It was a banjo. And I was enthralled or infected anyways, by watching TV in the early 60s, the Beverly Hillbillies, you know, having flat scrubs on there, or the Dillards at the Darling Boys on Andy Griffith's show and stuff. Well, all those guys played right there in LA. I mean, right, Santa Monica, the Troubadour, you know. And so we go watch. We met them and we hung out with them and stuff, you know. And Doug's banjo was a Bella Voce with a beautiful card back. And Dean's mandolin, Dean Webb's mandolin, the Dillards with a later model F5, but I was just enthralled, and I couldn't wait to build stuff like that. And those instruments are almost like holding a baby. I mean, they're different than a guitar, but they are, because of the period that they came out of, that late Victorian transition, things were ornamented beautifully, even parlor guitar. I mean, that you'll see kind of on this guitar, there's a lot of gingerbread around margaret tree wood on either side of the apple. That was kind of anniversary stuff, you know. Now it's like, oh my gosh, you're doing that, you know. But that was average stuff, and that's what I kind of learned on all the beautiful, beautiful instruments. And so I just gravitated to doing the coffee, the engraving, and like trying to replicate the stuff that I love. So.
Awesome. Well, Ren, I think this is where we're going to wrap it up. But thank you. This was thank you for your time and allowing us to do this and sharing your stories and your experience. Because for me, this has been awesome. Like this is what I kind of want out of people, just to share their experiences, because I know nowadays it's vastly different, and I think it's important to. What's the phrase I was going to say? I think it's important to look back on our history and preserve it as much as we can. And so, and learning at least has been.
So come and visit.
Oh, I will. I got a
please.
friend. Yeah, I got a friend who works out in Montana, and I know her and her husband are there pretty often, so I'll definitely come and visit.
That'd be cool. We that'd be neat.
Mm-hmm.
we have fantasized a lot and hope that it comes to fruition. We'd like to move out of my 4-car garage into a bigger facility. There are so many talented people where we live that would love to work with us. And we would like to, at some point, have opportunity to have instruments that are a particular, our version of a model of a dreadnought available. Or, whatever it would happen to be that somebody could just say, yeah, I'd like to have one of those at my store. And they could get it. Right now, all the sales are happening pretty much direct, which is no problem or anything. But the audience out there for what we do is way greater than what we can produce. And there's no secrets, there's no magic. It's just the love of the trade. And a lot of people have. Not everybody has had the opportunity gifted to them like I have. There's great craftsmen everywhere. I've just been in the right place at the right time. Like all it. So, like to serve more.
I think that's awesome. And like now you're in this place running Ren Ferguson Company with your family. Like, to me, that's amazing. So again, Ren, thank you for your time. I truly appreciate this. I'll have to come to Montana, have to car trip there. Oh, I would love to. I haven't been there in ages, but I would love to. So, but
there's a few more people here than when you were last time. Everybody else thinks it's great, and I can't blame them. I just wish they were visiting rather than moving here. So,
well, you don't got to worry about that from me. I'm not moving anywhere, not for a while. At least out of state for a while. So, but again, Ren, thank you so much. And
you're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity to visit with you.
Yeah, not a problem. And I hope we do this again.
Okay, I look forward to it.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Everybody